It was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny St., and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. In part 1 of our special Hands of Peace series, we talked to board members and host families about how Hands of Peace operates, and in part 2, we heard from Hands, who are Jewish Israeli, Palestinians from the West Bank, Palestinian citizens of Israel, and American high school students who just finished their first Hands of Peace experience in summer 2022. We asked them what they learned now having interactions with who they previously often considered their enemy. How did it change their perspectives and even themselves? In part 3, we're going to speak with Hands of Peace alumni. Hands of Peace has existed for 20 years. Most of the alumni are adults now. We've heard repeatedly that Hands of Peace dramatically changed how these teens thought about not only the other, but about themselves, and we thought it would be interesting to hear how these changes impacted them in their lives. Did the fun of these summer camps fade into a fond memory, or did the experience motivate the teens to make important choices in their life? First, I'd like to show a video of Hands of Peace to get a feel for the important work they're doing.
Jewish, Palestinian, and Arab American teenagers are joining together in Chicago's northern suburbs to promote peace in the Middle East.
It's like a good experience for us to see other people, to hear from other people, like from the other side, to hear what they think about us.
What I came for is to find the solution for the conflict I'm living in.
I came to Hands of Peace to take a stand to show my thoughts, to get to know the other people, see the other side, what they think.
Some of the Palestinian kids have experienced violent acts. Some of the Israeli participants have been around in suicide bombings and stuff like this. So all these kids really come with a big bag on their back.
People back home are depressed. They're losing hope. And we're just waiting for something new to happen.
Well, Hands of Peace is a dialogue-based coexistence program that is designed to bring together teenagers who are directly impacted by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So that means Jewish Israeli teens, Arab citizens of Israel, and Palestinian teens as well, along with American teens, because part of our mission is also to educate American teens and American families about what's happening in the Mideast.
Next, let's listen to a couple impressive alumni who were impacted profoundly by their time at Hands of Peace.
Hi, I'm Stav. I'm a Hands of Peace alumna from 2004. On 2018, 26 women were murdered here in Israel by domestic violence. I called my two friends, Dror Sadot and Ruti Klein, and together we initiated the first and the largest women's strike here in Israel. I'm a woman, I strike. Here on Rabin Square, in the main rally, we had more than 30,000 women protesting. During 2020, the COVID year, domestic violence increased all over the world. And we had to take an action once again. So we initiated the first Women's March here in Tel Aviv with 12,000 women and men protesting against domestic violence. As well, we initiated a project of spreading cards with hotline numbers and emergency numbers for women suffering from violence in their homes. And we cooperated with Domino's Pizza and other food delivery chains, and we spread all the cards to many houses around the country. I used to think of myself as very politically aware, and in that matter, Hands of Peace really shook my ground. For the first time in my life, I met Palestinian kids that were my age, but living behind a fence, have to spend hours on checkpoints, can't see their family members and other parts of the country. My mind was blown away. And I think that the main thing I took from Hands of Peace, there is no way to avoid and to run away from conflicts, but on the contrary, to treat the wound with gently and patient, and to acknowledge all the past pains, and together to build the bridges.
Hi, I am Elias, and I spent most of 2020 working in an internal department in a big hospital in Tel Aviv. At first, the whole hospital was working in emergency mode, working 12-hour shifts with 24 hours breaks in between, all week long with rotating staff. And working with all the protective gear made everything more difficult as a doctor. And of course, witnessing on such a large scale the suffering of the patients in a pandemic was not easy. I feel Hands of Peace helped me become a better listener, offering others support when possible, and sharing with them my truth. Whether it's a patient worried about a physical symptom or a friend facing a personal challenge, I believe taking part in Hands of Peace helped informing my identity as a young adult, which grew into the person that I am today.
I had the opportunity to speak at length with Niv Segal Chazak, a Hands of Peace alum who began her journey with Hands of Peace in 2013 as a hand, which is what Hands of Peace calls first-year summer campers. Then in 2014, during the war that broke out, she was what they call an XL, which is their leadership program. Learn what it was like to be in the U.S. while back at home, missiles on both sides were flying. How were the teens she was trying to chaperone feeling as they wondered how everyone back home was doing? Can you even do conflict resolution during a time like that? Finally, just this past summer, she was the Jewish-Israeli chaperone in San Diego. Niv Segal Chazak participated in the Hands of Peace summer program as a hand in 2013 and as an XL in 2014. This past summer, she acted as the Jewish-Israeli chaperone in San Diego. Niv earned the Tel Aviv County Outstanding Volunteer Prize for Leadership. She has served on the Jewish Arab Parliament, joined a youth movement called Hashomer Hatzair, and initiated numerous peace projects. Niv has been the recipient of 2 Hands of Peace scholarships and is currently studying social work at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Niv also has served her country, working with troubled teens that come from broken homes or have been kicked out of school. Her job is to prepare them with the tools they need to reach their fullest potential as they enter adulthood. She also spent a gap year working to preserve nature in the country. She currently works with the elderly who we say have made Aliyah or moved to Israel. It's difficult to navigate a new system for medical issues, especially during COVID. Apply for social services and set up your banking when you don't speak Hebrew very well. Besides, how lonely must they be leaving their relatives behind? At her young age, she has already shown her compassion, dedication, and success as a peace activist. Mazel tov. Welcome, Niv.
Hi.
So today you're 25, correct?
Yes. I had one of the girls saying, "What is it like to be our mother for 19 days?" And I was like, exhausted.
Yeah, that doesn't change ever as far as being a mom.
It was basically a lot about being in touch with everybody before the program, during the program. If anybody needed something dietary-wise, they forgot something, they used to talk to me, and obviously a lot of emotional support during the program itself, because a lot of people come, like they step out of dialogue because they're upset, they're crying, they're angry, and the chaperones are all about, okay, let's sit down together and discuss this and sort of calm down and go over everything that happened and sort of break it down into smaller pieces. A lot of them feel overwhelmed, and it's our job to be like, you know what, you're not alone. We're here for you. You need a break for a few minutes to focus and then come back. That's fine. If you want to talk about it, we'll talk about it. And they really do reach out for anything. You get messages all day long about everything. Receipts, shoes. The bread they tasted yesterday was so amazing, they had to tell me.
Well, that's cool. What languages do you speak?
I speak Hebrew, I speak English, I speak a little bit of French and a little bit of Spanish.
Before attending Hands of Peace, were you concerned about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yes, that's one of the reasons I joined the parliament, but I remember as a child looking at the news and seeing like leaders talking about the conflict and hearing like Palestinian leaders talking about how they're going to shed Jewish blood. I remember that was very terrifying as a little girl. I remember just getting up and walking to my room and asking my parents to call me back when they have something sweet and nice like commercials back on.
Did you discuss it at home?
I remember asking about it, and luckily my parents are very open-minded, and they always, whenever they presented like a one side of the story, they always told me, but this is not all that there is. You should know that there's more to the story that we don't know about. I remember that always it used to like resonate with me, like thinking, okay, there's something out there that perhaps I don't have access to, but it's part of somebody else's reality.
I believe you chose to attend Hands of Peace because of your work in the parliament. Is that correct?
Our facilitator in the parliament worked for Hands of Peace the summer before that. So she sent us the link to join, and I remember thinking, I'm not gonna get this. I'm not gonna get this in a million times. And the day before the registration closed up, my dad was like, we're sitting down, we're signing up, and you're gonna get it.
What did you mean you're not gonna get it? Because it's why? A competition? Because it's too expensive? What?
I didn't think I was special enough to get in. I didn't think I have what it takes to be part of such a program. I thought they're like, man, they really want this incredible, talented, know-it-all kids, and I felt like I knew nothing. I felt like every time politics was discussed, like I told you, I just ran to my room because it was too scary.
And how do you feel today about that?
I understand the girl I used to be, but I think I have much better understanding of how programs like this are. And I do feel like today I'm worthy. I do feel that I have what it takes, and I'm very passionate about it too.
Fabulous. What do you think you learned from your fellow participants?
I learned a lot about the things that you don't really hear. We talked a lot about media, something that always came up, the fact that so many times we don't get exposed to all the information. That was one thing that I remember being very, very clear about, that we used to discuss like an event or something that happened related to the conflict, and then somebody would say, wait, but my narrative describes it differently. From my side, it was said that this happened and not that. I remember always having to question everything. Dialogue was always about why. Why do you feel angry? Why do you feel exposed? Why do you feel the need to mention this piece of information and not something else? Always just trying to process things with yourself before you go to your friend. Always like thinking, okay, where does this meet me? Like, somebody said something, does it hurt me? Does it make me feel scared, vulnerable perhaps?
So they're making you very aware of your feelings when you listened, you learned how to listen intently.
Yes.
What do you think the impact in 2013 was on you? Did you look at anything differently?
I remember
the first one
back with an incredible enthusiasm. I felt like something that I never knew and never saw before was suddenly so bright. And I felt like I wanted to share it so much. I remember that I couldn't wait to come back and tell all my friends to sign up for Hands of Peace, and to tell all my friends about what I heard that's going on there that we don't hear about. And I remember feeling very energetic about it. Like, every time something happened on the news, I would be like, instead of the little girl that used to run away to her room, I used to be like, no, I'm sitting down, I'm staying, and then I'm going to ask my friend what they heard about it. Felt very curious.
How did you feel about Palestinians before you went there?
I had mixed feelings, a lot because of the media exposure, like I told you. Seeing these angry men yelling at TV that they want to kill all the Jews made me feel like, oh my God, these people are violent, these people are full of anger, they don't see me as a person. After Hands of Peace, I realized that we as people are just complex, and people could be angry and forgiving, and that a lot of them have these horrible family traumas that we don't know about, and that I need to be more attentive and more understanding before I judge them so hard.
Then in 2014, there was the war that really impacted my life, changed my entire life. And where were you during the war?
I was actually at the Excel program in Chicago. Just a few days after we landed, it started. And to say the least, it caused a lot of commotion around. You know, in a way, when you are in the States, it's a little bit easier because you feel not only physically that the conflict is far away from you, but a little bit like emotionally. That's how you can a little bit focus more about how you feel, because it's not like you're in your home and it's happening.
Yeah,
And
that's why
suddenly,
that's why I call my book Blasted from Complacency, a journey from terror to transformation in Israel. You're absolutely right. You know, I've always cared about Israel, but when you're hiding in bomb shelters and missiles are going off overhead and you can feel the percussion on your skin, it really gets your attention. The missiles during 2014 were where you were at, were the sirens going off? Did you have to go to the bomb shelters? And
when we came back from Hands of Peace, while I was in the camp, we had this. Until the very last day, we didn't know if we're coming back home or not because they closed Ben Gurion Airport. We were like, we thought we might stay there for another week or a month. We had no idea. My host family from back then were like, great, we're signing you up for a high school here. You're gonna stay. We were away. And for the kids to talk about the conflict, and then when they're not at home, but then the conflict is happening back at home with their family and their friends, it caused a lot of emotions. A lot of the kids, the younger ones, we the Excels felt like we understood a little bit better because we've been through one summer program. We knew that this is gonna cause a lot of just a lot of confusion. But the younger ones, the first year summer programmers, they were a little taken back by it. I remember that it was very scary, and it made it a little bit harder for people to see the other side, because in times of war, you're very, very focused about what's going on your side.
Plus, their relatives their safety's at risk, and so I would imagine become very defensive, and that must have been hard to try to have dialogue.
It was.
Were you able to?
We were. We couldn't ignore it, obviously. It was happening, and we, the Excels, as sort of like the more mature older brothers for the participants, we had to know how to deal with it and how to help them access all these tools that Hands of Peace are trying to teach you. How to reflect, how to observe, how to listen, and be like, we know that the emotions are very, very high right now. You're feeling everything in every fiber of your body, but let's just take a moment and sit down and try to see beyond that, trying to see the bigger picture. It was hard. It was really hard.
So you get back to Israel, and then you're running to bomb shelters, I take it, on occasion?
It was less than 24 hours after I came back. It was the first, I remember even it was the first night I came back. We came back in afternoon, and then very early in the morning, like 4 or 5 a.m., I had an alarm, and I was awake because I was jet lagging. And I remember feeling emotionally and physically exhausted, feeling like I don't have the emotions to deal with this right now, because I just went through this very intensive program, and now I have to suddenly focus on something so big and being worried about all my friends and all my family, and running and being always, we couldn't put headphones, we couldn't take long showers. We always had to be like with flip-flops or like shoes very close lying around, and always have our phones in our pockets, keys, a wallet, everything, just so we'd have a quick escape back to the shelter.
Where is the shelter for you?
Our shelter, each one of our buildings in our neighborhoods has a shelter at the very bottom of the building. So all the neighbors just go down from all the floors and they go in. And they connect, it's like a tunnel that connects between two buildings. So you would also meet the neighbors from the building next to you. It was a very small, cramped places, very, very tiny. And we're talking about something like 20 families are supposed to be in there.
Had you experienced that before?
We have, not as much as in 2014, but we have actually the first time that I ever experienced it was in Pillar of Smoke. That's how I think they called that operation back then. It was in 2012. The first time I've ever heard the siren go on. I was alone with my brother. We were alone, just the two of us, and I was just a teenage girl, and he was my younger brother. I remember feeling this incredible anger that somebody's trying to hurt my brother. I remember he was like going, we had like a backpack filled with like groceries and stuff like that. He ran to get it in the house. I was like, no, leave it there. We have to go down now. Now I remember thinking that I want to hurt everybody who's trying to hurt my brother right now.
Boy,
So
I can
angry.
so relate to you. I can so we were in Jerusalem, and they kept telling us, don't worry, they haven't bombed Jerusalem in 8 years, you'll be fine. Or wherever we'd go, they'd say, don't worry, the missiles don't go that far. And then they did. And the first time for us also, my husband had gone back to the hotel, and I was with some friends and their kids. And we walked into a pharmacy, and the sirens went off, and the pharmacist slammed the front door and said, started shouting, run to the bomb shelter. And I'm looking at my son and seeing the terror in his eyes. And your first reaction is you want to retaliate, what the heck? But then, by the time I got home, I got a hold of myself and realized, I can't even step on a bug without feeling guilty. And so I thought, Palestinian parents have to want their kids to be able to play safely in their backyards too. And so that started me on my journey. This whole thing started then. So it's very interesting to hear you and how you had very similar feelings at that time. Now, you had already met, and I assume made some Palestinian friends between your two cohorts that you attended on dialogue. During this time, did you stay in contact with them at all?
I did. I had this one, I guess, BFF, one of the boys. We're still in touch till this day, and he was also one of the very few who kept in touch with me while I was doing a military service. We were best friends back at the camp, and we kept in touch afterwards, because he, after our second program, he moved to the US to do his last high school year there, and then he just stayed. So I didn't see him as much, but we kept texting and updating and how's it going on. And just before I went to the summer program, I reached out to him again. I was like, this reminds me of us seeing all the kids, and like, how you doing and what's going on with you, and when are you gonna come visit again?
So during the war though, what was his attitude?
We were all very worried about each other, which is, in my perspective, one of the magical things that happen in Hands of Peace. Because when a war happens, everybody sort of stick to their side. Everybody stick to what they know and what they tell them. And then after Hands of Peace, everybody was so worried about each other. Everybody reached out. Everybody asked, are you okay? Is your family okay? Do you need help? Do you want me to call you? I remember that as being like one of the best supports that I've ever gotten. And because we were all going through the same sort of, I guess, process. And even though there was a whole war going out there, we still cared. We still remembered what Hands of Peace gave us. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's terrific. Did you stay away from discussing the war?
When? Like
during that time, other than how the other person was? Did anyone say, yeah, but why are you sending missiles on either side? Or did you talk about it at all?
We talked about it, but thanks to, like, we were at this point when we knew we're not accusing one another. We're at this point of like, I don't know what you heard, but in my area, they sent like 50 missiles, and we had to run every 30 minutes down to the bomb shelter. And they would tell me what's going on their side, and there wasn't like a feeling of accusation. You're to blame for it. You did this. It was a lot of feeling like, okay, let's try and make sense out of something that is insane together.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how just having the ability to speak to one another changes the perspective? I mean, the isolation seems to be the real culprit in so much of this,
You know,
when you don't get to speak to one another.
after Hands of Peace, we had a few seminars. We have them a few times a year, and they take us to places, and they took us to a few mixed schools, which was the first time I've ever got to see a mixed schools of both Palestinian and Israelis, and Neve Shalom, if you heard about it, which is also
Yes.
a place. And that was, for me, I was like, I had no idea this existed. If I knew, I would have signed up
Yeah.
and went a long, long time ago. I mean,
Yeah.
it's true, we don't communicate, and it's just so weird. Tel Aviv and Yafo are so close.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just incredible how far prospectively they are.
Yes, true. In the May, August violence or recently, did that impact you personally?
You mean when they had a lot of the stabbings and everything?
Yeah, when bombs
Yeah.
and all that in May last year.
Last year, not this year.
And
I
then
have-
this year, they just recently they had some bombings.
Recently, they had a few bombings, but a few months ago, we had a lot of stabbing cases that Palestinians attacked Israeli citizens or
Right.
like soldiers in the streets,
Mhm.
or we had shootings. I
Mm.
think that we had a few shootings in Hadera, Ramat Gan, Jerusalem too. No, not in Jerusalem, but I think it was an attempt. But anyway, it caused me a lot of anxiety, I have to say. I'm a full-time student,
Yeah.
and it caused me to shut down completely.
Shut down in what regard?
I was scared to go out. I was really scared to go out. I didn't go home to see my parents for like for a month or something because I was so scared of going on public transportation.
So do you
really
think you've
scared
got
me.
PTSD?
I don't think so. I definitely have a lot of concerns until this day. Whenever I hear like a loud noise, I think it's a siren, and I immediately start to clutch up and like I don't think I have PTSD because I'm very, very much aware what's going on around me. Having anxiety in Israel is very, very common because
Yeah.
of that. It's very, very common.
Unfortunately.
A lot of people have panic attacks a lot. I wasn't the only one. I remember I talked to a friend of mine. We got together during that time, and she was like, I have to confess, I had a panic attack yesterday because I needed to go to the mail office to get something, and I was like, I had one too just 2 days ago, and we sat down, we talked about it, and
What a shame
yeah,
that to have to live like that. A new thing for you, I'm sure, well, I know, must have been when you went to the Mexican border in San Diego. What was that like?
it was so strange. And in some ways it felt a little bit familiar, but in other ways it felt so different. I remember feeling anxious, even though I was on the US side, I remember feeling very, very anxious. Even though I knew I had a visa and I'm okay to be here, I felt like everybody's watching me all the time because there were cameras everywhere and there were policemen and border patrol, I think that's how you call it. And during the time we were there, we saw someone trying to cross to the other side. And it was shocking, really. And seeing somebody trying to get to the other side, and the minute they crossed, somebody arrested them. I was feeling very, very nervous about it. I was like, then again, you have this. I was like thinking to myself, but you have this back at home.
Mm-hmm. Had you ever been to the border between Israel and the West Bank?
Many times.
And do you feel different there?
I think I feel different because then there I feel because I know I'm on the stronger side, you know. If I show my Israeli ID to a soldier, he'll be like, "Oh, okay, you're cool." But you know, when we were at the Mexican USA border, I was like, "I'm the stranger. I'm the foreign one," and that's how they will see me. That's how they will perceive me.
So you joined an organization called Hashomer Hatzair. What was that like? What was that all about?
So it's a youth movement that is a socialist youth movement. After Hands of Peace, I felt a little bit like I wanted to be active socially, and I was looking for the right platform.
How long were you with them?
Because I only joined in my senior year, which I very much regret. I was only there for 1 year, but I still kept in touch with with the friends from there.
So it was a high school program.
You can join the Shomer Hatzair from the very 4th grade.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Oh my!
And my friends, most of my friends already joined back, I think 7th grade, no, 8th grade. And I was like a late bloomer. I was like, no, it's not my thing. Just like with Hands of Peace, I'm not gonna fit in. I don't have what it takes. And after Hands of Peace, I felt very, very confident. I felt very passionate about being activist, I want to know, I want to be involved. And it was like, okay, this is what I need right now. This is my way of keeping that fire still burning inside of me.
Overall, what do you think the impact of participating in Hands of Peace was on your life?
Well, before Hands of Peace, like I said, I was very shocked when they accepted me to the program. I didn't think I had like the qualities required, and I knew very little about the conflict. I always perceived myself as the funny girl, one who always makes jokes. And after Hands of Peace, I realized that I have so much depth and I want to be heard, but I was always so afraid that whatever I'm going to say, people are going to laugh about it. So I didn't. And Hands of Peace sort of gave me that experience of people taking me seriously, people listening to me. And it was a sort of like a stepping stone into where I am today, because it also gave me the realization that I love working with people. I was before that a theater girl, all solo. And after Hands of Peace, I was like, I love being with teenagers my age and doing things with them. I love being a guidance counselor and being sort of in charge and helping younger kids. And Hands of Peace was really just like a domino effect. When I came back, I was like, I had no idea this is who I am.
When you were in the Army and you were assigned to work in a school for youth who had been removed from their high schools and needed extra help to finish their education, why were the kids removed from their high schools?
A lot of them had behavioral issues. Either they skipped school, or they were violent, or we had a few kids who had like mental health issues, and that made it harder for them to attend school. They each had their very specific background. I remember at first I thought, oh, they're all criminals, but then once you get to know them, you realize each one of them has a different path and a different story.
Having that as an assignment for your Army assignment, it's not what I think most people would expect for an Army assignment. Is that typical of an Army assignment? How did you end up with such a thing?
Well, a lot of that has to do with before you start the Army, you go through these like a lot of tests, and they sort of trying to get your personality, and they send you like questionnaires about different types of roles you can do in the army, and you have to rate them. And my dad, since I was 12 years old, told me, like, you're really good with kids, you should be a teacher soldier. And that sank in very, very deep. So when I had the chance, I rated it like the top of my choices, because after Hands of Peace and after I did my gap year at the SDNI, I realized I'm really good with people. That's what I'm very, very passionate about. And it's a very small unit. Not a lot of people know about it. Like only 500 girls and boys from around Israel get to do this part. And I felt very, very lucky about it. It was just incredible because we were basically we had a course that was all about education, psychology, nothing like anything else you have in the army. And I felt really blessed that I got this part. I felt very, very lucky.
Yeah, it sounds like if you have to go to the army, at least you can do something that's, I don't know, obviously we think of the army as, associated with violence. So good for you that you were able to find that position. Fantastic. Can you describe what the Multiversita program is that it talks about that you participated in, that brings together Israeli and Palestinian students to work on projects?
Yeah, so basically the Multiversita project is in the Hebrew University, and they have different courses that relate to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And the whole thing about this is project-based learning. That's what all the courses are about. That each course has like your final presentation is to present sort of a project that you created together, Israelis and Palestinians. So I picked a course about placemaking. And so, do you know what placemaking is? It's basically, we know public places and something that city halls plan, but nobody asks the people what do they want to have there. So placemaking is all about giving the people the choice in how to plan the public space to their needs and to their likings. So we decided to take an area. We were two Israelis and two Palestinian, 4 girls, and we decided to take an area in the university and we did a diagram of how we wanted to change it. And we wanted to put we thought about doing like board games. It was like a place where a lot of people, it was a very main place in the university, but not a lot of people stayed there. It wasn't very appealing. It was very like gray, dark. We thought about putting like board games and like putting like bar stools and like trying to make people talk to each other and start a conversation with one another, like with checkers, with Monopoly, and doing also vertical gardens on some of the pillars over there.
At the university, are there, I assume there's Jewish Israelis and Palestinian citizens of Israel who go there? Is that correct?
It's about 50-50.
And do you associate with one another there?
I do.
You do, but is that typical?
I don't think so, because well, some of the PCIs don't know Hebrew very well, and a lot of the Israelis don't speak Arabic. And
so how do they go to school there?
Well, either they take a lot of English courses.
Are classes taught in English?
Yeah, there's classes taught in English. It's mandatory. Because I work in the library of the university, and we have a lot of Palestinian students coming in asking to borrow a book or to take a computer, and some of them don't know Hebrew very well. And so I think that, and for some of the students from both sides. Unlike me, who had the Hands of Peace experience, it's also the first time they have an encounter. And I think a lot of them are a little bit scared and to reach out and try to make connections.
So are there any clubs that do that on campus?
We don't have a lot of clubs at the Hebrew University. It's not a thing at universities here in Israel, but Multiversity is one of the programs. That's why I was so interested in it, because it was really different for me and was like a little bit of bringing back that Hands of Peace magic. And I missed it terribly, I have to admit.
You can start it on your campus.
No, it is on my campus. They do it every year. They have 6 different
No, but I
courses.
mean, it sounds like another arm of you're working on making this space where people can talk.
And that
Maybe
is yeah, I mean, when
another, call some meetings there, and they can play games, and they can, sometimes when you have a different activity that isn't so much in your face that you're working on peace, like playing a game.
Yeah, no.
Before you know it,
you're right. You're definitely
friends.
right about that. It's always, I have to admit that being in school is very overwhelming.
No
I haven't
doubt.
been a student in a very, very long time. So
Mm-hmm.
these past 2 years were very, very intensive. And because I do social work, I also have to volunteer twice a day, like 2 days a week somewhere, like I did with the elderly. So it's really hard to try to squeeze in something else. I have to.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could, change something to make a project like that. But anyway, just an idea, because it seems like your passion, and it seems like an extension of what you want to do anyway with your Multiversita project, and it would combine everything that you love. So it's as they say, if you get to work on what you love to do, you'll never feel like you work a day in your life. And that's how I feel about what I do.
I really hope that's how it goes with social work. I picked social work because I believe in social change and policy making and trying to make a difference with people instead of with, telling people what to do. That's one way, but I believe you can make a change with people, and social work is one of the very few places you can make that change.
Yeah. So what's your ultimate goal that you'd like to accomplish as far as working on peace?
In my life, I have this long time dream of creating a hostel, of opening a hostel for troubled youth, both Palestinian and Jewish Israelis, that they can have therapeutical meetings and sort of a way to learn both languages, a little bit like Neve Shalom, but more focused about troubled youth, and a lot using ecology, like gardening and therapeutic sessions with animals. It's like a very, very far-fetched dream of mine, but I've been thinking about it for many, many years.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you've already done so much for people. It's really amazing. It's really fantastic. I appreciate your time today, and keep doing such wonderful work. You're really helping everyone. Beautiful soul. Next, let's listen to Stav. Afterwards, we'll hear from the last alumni that we'll speak with at length, who is Emily Kenward, who, after experiencing Hands of Peace in many positions, has gone on to work at Hands of Peace as their Chicago site director.
Plastic Free Israel is a grassroots movement and now a officially registered charity in Israel. And it's something that I started back in January of 2018, but it's a growing movement. We have over 13,000 followers on Facebook and over 4,000 on Instagram. And we've collected over 20,000 pounds of trash from Israel's coastline in the past 3 years. Since I've been in London, I've been doing a variety of environmental focused jobs, really just helping businesses and communities and even the healthcare industries on figuring out what problems they have concerning air pollution and how we can help mitigate for those. So I think Hands of Peace, the biggest lesson for me was really about learning to look at things from someone else's viewpoint. It's really about meeting people and saying, okay, you know, you're doing something that I find as an environmentalist destructive, but actually, why are you doing it? And kind of stripping back and understanding, you know, the need for a certain action and then thinking about the solutions.
I call Emily Kenward a real Hands of Peace success story. She embodies what can happen when young people have the opportunity to explore unique learning experiences early in their lives. Emily first participated in the Hands of Peace summer program in 2015 as what the organization calls a hand, or a first-year teen attendee of the camp. In 2016, she returned in their Excel Leadership Program. She also participated in the Hands of Peace Eco Peace Collective Impact Project in 2018 and was awarded the Rooftop Consciousness Award in 2020. Inspired by her Hands of Peace experience, Emily wanted to explore further the intersection between environmental justice, peace, and security within communities affected by armed conflict. She graduated with honors from Tulane University in May 2020 with a BS in Environmental Biology and a BA in Political Science, International Relations. In August 2021, she graduated from Tel Aviv University with an MA in Conflict Resolution and Mediation, as well as received a mediation certificate from the Boserman Center for Conflict Resolution under the auspices of the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. Emily specializes in feminist foreign policy and the ways in which increasing women's leadership and amplifying historically excluded voices leads to more equitable, transformative, and holistic peace and policy making. Today, Emily works at Hands of Peace as the Chicago site director. I'd love to find out more about your personal journey, Emily. Emily attended Hands of Peace at the Chicago location. How old were you when you attended Hands of Peace for the first time?
Yeah, I was, I think around 17. I was a little bit older in the age group. I did it my junior year of high school, and then I came back as an XL my senior year of high school. So right before or in the midst of, I guess, the college application process and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life.
Good timing, really.
Yeah.
Where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Deerfield, so just a northern suburb of Chicago. So Hands of Peace really has been kind of a local organization and has always been sort of around, but really didn't get involved until 2015.
What's your religion?
That is a complicated question. It's actually part of how I got, I guess, started with Hands of Peace. My mom is Jewish, my dad is Catholic, and then I actually have an uncle who converted to Islam when he was in college. So I grew up with my own sort of
Hands of Peace.
Yeah, my own sort of interfaith, a bit of an introduction, I guess, to dialogue, more of an informal sense. We would celebrate Christmaka and, you know, spring the Hanukkah and, you know, celebrate all together. I did grow up predominantly Jewish. I would say now I'm more spiritual, but definitely influenced by being able to have open and honest discussion with all of my family throughout the years.
Were you in the American delegation as far as part of Hands of Peace?
Yes.
What languages do you speak? Anything other than English?
English fluently. Spanish I took all throughout sort of middle school and high school. Right now I'm trying to learn Hebrew and Arabic. I would say I can survive, but maybe not express myself fully in those languages, but living in Israel especially, and traveling within Palestine, little things here and there I pick up.
before attending Hands of Peace, were you concerned about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah, before attending Hands of Peace, as I said, so my mom, her side of family is Jewish. I actually do have cousins who live in Israel. Following the Holocaust, a lot of my family got kind of dispersed. And so part of that family did end up in Israel. And so for me growing up, I've met those cousins. I actually first was in Israel in 2011, never traveled into kind of Palestine or the West Bank before. I have, family kind of all over the spectrum. In Tel Aviv, a little bit more, liberal or left wing. In Jerusalem, inching a little bit towards conservative. I have cousins who live on a settlement in the West Bank. And so hearing this kind of wide spectrum of ideas, but from only the Israeli perspective, hearing about Hands of Peace piqued my interest because I was really motivated to meet, Palestinians, but also Israelis and other American teens who were interested in just kind of open and honest discussion. Definitely heard about the conflict, but wanted to learn more, especially firsthand knowledge about the conflict.
So a dialogue between the participants who are Jewish Israelis, Palestinian citizens who are citizens of the state of Israel, Palestinians from the West Bank, American Jews and Muslims and Christians, and even those who don't identify religiously are a big component of Hands of Peace. What were the dialogues like for you?
Dialogue was really an eye-opening experience. As I mentioned, I grew up in this really interfaith family.
Yes.
And so I was used to sort of having these open and honest discussions. And I was expecting that to be my first dialogue experience. It's facilitated by one Israeli and one Palestinian trained facilitator. I remember the first day walking in the room, I was expecting us to all sort of just dive right in and start talking and sharing experiences, but really it was kind of a slower process building that trust in the first place. My first dialogue experience also with Hands of Peace completely blew up into fighting the first 30 minutes of the 2.5 hours.
Verbally, I would.
Verbally, yes, of course, verbally, yes, verbally.
Well,
No, we had, it's teenagers, discussing these really intense topics. And we had a participant make a comment that upset another participant. They got into a verbal fight. Half the dialogue ended up leaving the room. And it was a few Americans left over, all of us kind of staring at each other like,
wow,
this is dialogue? Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
But at the end of the dialogue session, everybody came back into the room, and the two that began the fight in the first place, patted each other on the back and said, thank you for having this conversation, and I respect you, and I'm excited to do it again tomorrow. So I think that that was really, for me,
either they learned a lot or they're really masochistic.
Right. Well, I in these sort of peace building spaces, there's always this thing where you feel like you have no choice but to be optimistic. You kind of have to, you're faced with all these really difficult, conflicts easy. It's really easy to expel this energy into conflict, but peace and trying to organize everything and put everything back together, it's extremely hard. And I think that's something that I learned, especially from Hands of Peace, is that peace, is not easy, and it's kind of sometimes comes out of conflict, but you come together at the end. Hopefully that's the goal of dialogue at Hands of Peace.
Well, you in general wouldn't be working on peace if there wasn't conflict, and it is hard. I speak to peace organization after peace organization, and when you talk to the different participants, the first thing we all have to learn is to keep our mouth shut and to listen, because we all like to say what we think. And it's really hard, even when you're keeping your mouth shut and paying attention, to hear something that can be so offensive to your way of thinking. But that's the whole process. That's what it is. It's what conflict is. And these are serious conflict. People's lives have been taken and are at risk. And they've seen often things that they can never erase from their head. It's hard. I agree. I totally agree with you.
Yes. No, and as an American in the room, that's what to navigate that space as well, because you want to make space, enough space that the Israeli and Palestinian citizens of Israel participants need. But also we have a stake in this conflict. We've affected this conflict as, the American government and American military. And so kind of thinking about what is our place in the conversation. So definitely that balance of listening and then also contributing to move the conversation forward.
Any other things that you feel you learned from your fellow participants?
Yeah, I think definitely that empathy that you mentioned was extremely important, to be able to sit in a room and kind of strip away all of these layers and getting to the root of who somebody is, and not just being, a representative of their community or their nation. That's, a huge thing with Hands of Peace is you're told you're not representing your delegation, you're not representing, the US or Israel or Palestine. You're supposed to be representing yourself and your family and your background. And to see the beginning of the dialogue process where you are kind of putting up those barriers and, speaking on that government or community level, and then seeing that kind of strip away with various different types of programming that happens outside of dialogue to finally start opening up and sharing personal stories. I think for me, that's like the biggest gift that I received was when people started opening up, and I too was able to open up and share things that I don't think I've shared with a lot of other community spaces that I'm a part of. And so to be able to have that, empathy and trust that was able to be built, it was really transformative.
Do you feel that your perspective of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict changed after all these dialogue sessions?
Yeah, I think it definitely expanded a lot. For me, my view on the topic and my experience with the topic was very much from my own perspective or from the perspective of my family that was only living, one side, the Israeli side. And so to be able to talk to other Americans who have other experiences, definitely not like my own, and then also other Israelis and Palestinians with their different experiences, it definitely expanded my view and my interest in kind of Israel-Palestine. And I kept coming back to it. I actually wasn't supposed to get my BA degree in international relations. I was only going to Tulane for environmental biology. I was the type of person that my freshman year, first week of school, declared my Bachelor's of Science degree, walked across the street to Audubon Zoo and got a job as a zookeeper because that's what I wanted to do, is reproductive sciences with endangered animals and conservation. That's really what I—
close.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but because of Hands of Peace, I kept going back to these different ideas, and I ended up doing a project on the Paris Climate Accords and seeing how it is really necessary for countries to talk to each other to get these huge policies passed. I started taking a bunch of international relations courses, and then my last day of my senior year in 2020, I got a phone call from my academic advisor telling me, hey, do you want a BA? Because I ended up getting enough credits to get an international relations degree. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So Hands of Peace helped me accidentally get a BS and a BA. But I kept coming back to this idea of how can we use the environment as a tool for peace building, is kind of what my degree evolved into, is this idea of finding a topic, a place of common ground where we could use these peace building tools to dissect this topic and get people to work on these things together to kind of hopefully snowball into greater peace building opportunities. So that's really what Hands of Peace showed me, was this, I guess, snowball effect of being able to reach so many different people's lives and, I don't know, expanding from there.
Yeah, a number of peace organizations I've worked with do use the environment doesn't know if you're Israeli or Palestinian. They, and if you need water, you need water. So it's at least a good avenue that presents itself to let people. Oh, by the way, if you look at it, you're actually working on peace too.
Right, exactly.
It's a win-win. Gotta love it. Our generations have really screwed it up. And, listening to these teens, they really, if this is what they're like at the beginning of their journey, holy moly, there is definitely a lot of hope. And it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. So after your first Hands of Peace experience, how do you think it changed you or your thoughts, or do you think it changed how you thought about all these various topics?
I think my Hands of Peace experience definitely made me even more, I guess, globally minded than I already was. This idea of looking at issues or situations that feel super large or complex, but as a youth, for me with Hands of Peace, it definitely made me think about international issues, and then also how I myself as a youth, for me, I think Hands of Peace really empowered me to think about my voice and the youth group and how we can kind of unite our voices together to be even stronger and actually affect change in these global contexts. I felt definitely more empowered and definitely more motivated to explore these international contexts, and how can I, as a young person, as a female, as somebody with an interfaith background, make space at the table and make space for myself. And I think that was, really important for me. Very, empowering, I think, is the big word.
You received the 2020 Hands of Peace Rooftop Consciousness Award. What is that?
Yeah, it's an award that goes to a alum who continues, I guess, working within the peace building field. So somebody who demonstrates a strong interest or commitment to working positively within their own community and continuing kind of their work as like a Hands of Peace alum, but also affecting change. For me, I was really grateful to have received it in 2020, just with my continued work with Hands of Peace, but then also continued work specifically in Israel-Palestine, looking at water rights issues between Israeli and Palestinian populations.
So you've continued that work?
Yeah, when I was living in Tel Aviv, I also worked as a research and project support intern with EcoPeace Middle East, which is the largest kind of environmental nonprofit in the area that has offices in Tel Aviv, Ramallah, as well as in Amman, Jordan. And so I was able to do a lot of work with them, particularly with their Youth Diplomats program, to provide curriculum for their youth are considered, I think it's 21 to 30-year-olds. And so providing negotiation work with them, mediation work with them, different training programs, and discussing especially the Jordan River Basin as well as the Gaza envelope, doing research for them there.
How cool. Was this your first year as the Chicago site director?
Yeah, so this was my first, the 2022 summer program was my first Hands of Peace summer program as site director.
So what was that experience like?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It was again, as I said, 3 weeks seems like a lot, and then it goes by so fast. But it was really cool to be able to use my experience as an alum and think about, well, what did I really enjoy? What didn't work so well or might not have translated so well at the time? And what would I have liked to seen as a participant? And thinking about, talking to other alumni and seeing what they got out of the program, and really create a summer program from scratch. It was also, it was a unique time because we haven't had a summer program since 2019 because of COVID.
Right.
So really relaunching the summer program. This was our first in-person program. So
But
thinking
you
about
had
how to,
you had
oh yeah,
the online
yeah,
portion as well?
in 2021, yeah, we did what was called Summer Program Launchpad. Although it was a short summer program, it was online, and it was also delegation specific. So the Americans only met Americans, the
Oh,
Palestinians and the Israelis the same. And so we actually did have some summer program Launchpad, I guess, alum, because they completed that program, come to Hands of Peace this year because we wanted to give them an opportunity to actually have interfaith dialogue with each other. So we had an interesting mix of participants who had a little bit of a foundation within at least leadership skills or facilitation skills, because that's kind of what they looked at with Summer Program Launchpad. But really everybody that was with us did not have experience with dialogue before starting Hands of Peace. Yeah, it was very cool.
Some of them knew each other?
Some of them knew each other from Summer Program Launchpad. We did have a few participants who were recruited from the same high school. So we had some participants that knew each other because they both attended the same high school where they might have seen a Hands of Peace presentation. But for the most part, a lot of participants don't know each other at all. When I applied, I didn't know anybody.
Right.
We had a few siblings though, so we did have some siblings that obviously knew each other.
In your bio, it says that you specialize in feminist foreign policy and the ways in which increasing women's leadership and amplifying historically excluded voices lead to more equitable, transformative, and holistic peace and policy making. Having been among the first female managers during my corporate years, it's definitely of interest to me. And I'd like you to explain to our audience the benefits to society of increasing women's leadership in the world to promote peace.
Yeah, so feminist foreign policy is really more of a like a mechanism or a thought process where you approach different international relations scenarios from a more holistic lens. So thinking about how an issue might impact somebody of a different gender, but also a different sexual orientation or race or ethnicity or faith, and how you can better societies by actually providing to each of these individual groups. For me, that was something, especially in my master's program, that was really important to me, is looking at whose voices haven't we heard from yet, and how do we, expand the pie. Something we were taught how to increase the pie, or how to put as many seats at the table as possible, because especially within conflict contexts, women in particular are affected differently than men. And so thinking about how some sort of policy that might have the best intention, but unfortunately didn't take women into account in the first place, might exclude women or other minority groups, which ends up being really unproductive in the long run. And so how do we think about women and these different groups when thinking about mediation and different foreign policy concepts? And so for me, it was, definitely looking at women and female leaders and how to increase that. Like, I myself would love to be in the negotiation room, in the peace building room, speaking with world leaders, ideally when this conflict comes to a conclusion. I would love to be that person that has that seat at the table. But if it's not me, then who else can better represent these groups whose voices are excluded? And how can we get them into that negotiation space? For me, those voices that are usually excluded also includes the environment, because a lot of peace processes just kind of check off boxes like, okay, everybody needs water. Great, we'll do it, 27, 20, whatever, like you split it up, how it gets split up, but without thinking about how war and conflict causes environmental damage in the first place, and how can peace building processes be more inclusive to think about, well, how can post-conflict reconstruction include environmental protections and include ways in which we can rehabilitate the environment while moving forward in a productive way.
I want to thank you for your time. Next week, we'll conclude with the Peace with Penny Hands of Peace series with part 4, and we'll be looking closely at a unique perspective. What's it like to live like a Jewish Israeli or Palestinian? We'll hear directly from Jewish Israelis and Palestinians about their experiences during 2014, May 2021, and the current violence. Life in a war zone is hard. We see horrible scenes on our TV sets, but it's very different when you live there and the impact it has on your psyche, knowing that at any time you could be in what is a combat zone. Many people, due to the incessant fear, block it out of their mind, but we wonder, how does that affect their ability to feel? What is it like to live in an area where it's likely that many, if not most people, suffers from PTSD? Come join us and tell your friends. Hear directly from people who live with combat being a common part of their lives. In the meantime, let's continue to hope that everyone will someday live in peace, shalom, and salam.